Well, welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, and I trust that the lunch conversations were as enriching as the sessions that you've seen this morning. Now let's dive into a dialogue without which there is actually no future. Survival before sustainability, an agenda for this decade. Despite decades of climate negotiations, the world is not on track to meet its climate targets. Adaptation and mitigation funding still falls short of what is needed, and despite pledges to triple climate finance, the path to implementation remains unclear. Fragmentation in international climate policy and geopolitical tensions have stalled progress, leaving the most vulnerable nations facing escalating climate impacts without adequate support. The promise of net zero seems increasingly elusive as commitments are met with inconsistent action and vague timelines, which brings us to the critical question: if survival is at stake, can sustainability wait? So today's panel, Survival Before Sustainability, an agenda for this decade, is not about distant goals, but about immediate actions. We face a decade of unprecedented challenges, and the Global South stands on the front lines of this crisis. And it's time to reevaluate priorities and develop pragmatic strategies that address today's survival needs while laying the foundation for long-term sustainability. Now, who better to lead this complex discussion than our chair, Pradeep Bhargava, chairman of MECF Limited. Please give him a big round of applause. Now, you may remember that around 20 years ago, he pioneered the Pune model to tackle the power deficit in our city, an initiative that balanced immediate survival needs with long-term strategic solution. And today's session really asks us to do something similar, but on a global scale, to navigate immediate crisis. I'm giving you a huge responsibility here, but to navigate the immediate climate threats while laying the groundwork for a sustainable future. So his experience in transforming crises into opportunities makes him uniquely qualified to lead this critical conversation. A lot of responsibility on your shoulders. Okay, he is joined by an exceptional panel. So can I invite them up, please? Dr. Dhruba Purkayastha, Director of Growth and Institutional Advancement at the Council of Energy, Environment and Water. Dr. Arjun Karki, Executive President of Rural Reconstruction Nepal, and former Ambassador of Nepal to the United States, Colombia, Costa Rica. Big round of applause, please. Thank you. You've all eaten, so there's no excuse. Wonderful. S. Raghupati, Senior Advisor at the Confederation of Indian Industry. Kaustubh Gosavi, Senior Program Manager, Sustainable Cities and Transport. Pradeep, over to you to solve the most pressing issue of our times.
Charter was to solve, I wouldn't have accepted this responsibility, but let me put a rider. This is very common in every seminar. You say, Ari Baba, post-lunch, how do you keep people awake? You know, it's a standard thing, and that not only the panel members, but even the convener has the challenge. But Gautam had a smart idea. See, if we had he picked on the word survival. If he had said we're going to discuss climate change, people will think it's a weather we discuss all the time, so what's there to be excited? You can go to sleep. If he had said we're going to do net zero, they'll think it's some game going on, net zero, nothing very much. If he had said sustainability, people said this has been going on for decades now. The only thing which has overtaken them is AI now. Otherwise, every other seminar was on sustainability, isn't it? So Gautam and I agreed that we'll use the powerful word called survival. Now, survival, sleeping man can get up. Forget about a man going to sleep when you talk about your own survival. And I think young lady has already made it very strong. So what I want to say is, it's not dramatizing. I'm not creating attention-grabbing things. The situation is not only serious, but is also urgent. So I think what my colleagues and I are going to be trying to do is bring in an element of urgency, bring in an element that we need to do it. Generally, it's very nice to be outsourcing responsibilities. We are quite outsource. Government will do it. COP will do it. Incidentally, COP stands for Conference of Partners. They're supposed to, Conference of Parties. They're supposed to take care globally everything. We know what a COP does in our everyday life. Here is a case we want to chase that COP and say do something because COP is not able to do what it's supposed to be doing. So here's the things. And I just want to again dramatize the economic resilience and resurgence in area of fragmentation is the theme of our AED. I think we need to call it something that different, which is social realization and resilience by and actions by us. Otherwise, it's not fragmentation. We're going to fracture and destroy ourselves. Am I sounding dramatic, friends? We'll just come to know as what it is. So let me just share with you the flow. My colleagues and I have discussed it. My job is to set the context, 7 to 8 minutes, and the meter had started as soon as I came in here. The next, each of my colleagues will be given an opportunity to speak. Is that 62 or is that correct timings? I thought it was 75 total. No problem, just tell us to. Okay, I was just a little anxious. Anyway, I would request each one of you to make it 5 to 6 minutes of your initial statement. I'll put a question to you thereafter. And what we're going to do is something interesting. After each one of the panelists has said, instead of just me asking, I'm going to request each of these panelists to ask the other panelists something about what they have said, and then interact between them. It makes it more interactive, and it certainly makes everybody alert and listen to what others are saying because they have to ask a question, so in lighter vein. So that's what we're going to do, and thereafter there'll be 10 to 12 minutes, depending on what Vandana says, for question answers. Why am I sounding so strongly negative? I just picked up news items in the last 6 weeks. The news headlines say 2024 was the hottest year globally in last 15 years. That's a fact. Last week, it says significant glacier retreat in Arunachal Pradesh because of which water is going to be a problem. Day before yesterday, there was a news item that Gulmarg is cancelling its winter sports because there's not enough snowfall. This is happening. And my dear Pune, yesterday headline said, this is the first fortnight in Pune's February, which has been the hottest in last 10 years. So what are these headlines telling us? Of course, these days headlines are all about Trump and other things, so you don't bother about it. But the reality is crisis is severe. And don't we hear about sudden fires, sudden floods, and sudden heat waves coming in, which were never predictable? Don't we know summer is hot and summer has become hotter and winters? Then we also have a very, very disturbing statement, and I think my colleagues will say, Columbia Climate School has conveyed that January 25 was the 18th month in the last 19 months when the global average surface temperature breached 1.5 degrees centigrade. So this 1.5 degrees centigrade, which was a global target, has been breached in 18 out of the 19 months as per this. Now, for the benefit of others, what does this 1.5 mean? 1.5 degree, 1.5 degrees Celsius. Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, IPCC, another acronym, had identified many years ago, decades ago, that if the temperature goes beyond 1.5 degree above the pre-industrial level, there'll be catastrophe. And if it goes beyond 2 degree, it'll be irreversible. So friends, we are talking about knowing what is there, and in spite of that, we still are struggling with this. Having said the urgency, it means we need to do something now. Talking about the international panel, I'll take, particularly from you, sir, a preemptive bail, and Gautam from you also, because I'm going to say something not very nice about how international diplomacy has worked in this case. We as society know a lot, we discover things, we find solutions, we identify technology, etc. Our natural intelligence wasn't enough, we got artificial intelligence going. And it was predicted long time back that collaborative efforts are required to ensure that the climate change doesn't become as lethal as it was predicted to be 20, 30 years back. In 1994, when UN framework was established, in the year 2005, Kyoto Protocol had said, these are all the COPs meeting, Kyoto Protocol had said, look, the sinners will pay, we're going to have the rich countries cut down their emissions, they're going to do it. Rich countries said, no, not only the sinners, others should also pay. So we came to Paris Agreement, where we said all of us will contribute depending on what is called national determined amount. Everything was agreed in Paris, that this money will be contributed, people will cut down. Mind you, all this period, what people were supposed to do more of, they did less of it, renewable energy. What they were supposed to do less of, they did more using fossil fuel. So systematically, we have had violation. The latest, I think, was in our, this happened, COP29 happened at Agar Bazaar. 5 out of 8 days were spent in discussing what the agenda should be. And as if all this was not enough of not being able to reach, they said 300 billion instead of 100 billion, but required was trillion billion. I'm throwing these numbers to say that the international global network has not been able to do it. That also will say 300 million after 235. Complete thing. And if there was a requirement of a last nail in the coffin of global arrangement, I'm sounding, we had US walking out of the Paris Agreement one more time, and we heard a slogan called drill, drill, drill. You remember? So US is going ahead and going to drill, drill, and drill. And while I don't know what we're going to drill, our own, so the message is international system is not going to do. And my very cynical, perverted way of this, when international system has not been able to do anything when 100 to 200 people have been dying every day due to war for the last 2 years, every single day, average is that. And what do we hear? Countries are going to increase their defense expenditure as percentage of GDP. Why do you increase the expenditure on defense? Because not to increase prosperity, because you go to try it out somewhere. So when guys, international system is insensitive to people dying today, will the international system be worried about how some island might get underwater as because of climate change 10 years hence? Will they really worried if some people will die in Africa or countries because of higher temperature? They won't. Local maximization has taken over global optimization is the message that I want to give. Hence my submission that we need to certainly keep attending meetings. I don't think that's the point, but we need to recognize that each one for himself or herself is the issue. So my last point here is we as a community, we as an enterprise, we as a company, we as a country, we as a city, and we as a group of nations should start taking the agenda in our own hands. And it is possible? Of course it's possible. There are multiple cases where if we take up our own things, we'll at least solve some of the problems, rather than believing that somebody else is going to solve our problem with the environment. Last 2 minutes, I'm going to just illustrate how we, and I take the liberty, Raghupati, you and Muthu have done the work. We in CII started an agenda called GreenCo. We got 1,000 companies. Mind you, these are companies which are in state sector, private sector, large companies, small companies, multinational, Indian Railways, everybody. We said we'll become green in our total conduct. Every single element of that enterprise is green. It's called a GreenCo. These data for the only 500 companies, and believe me, these 500 companies have been able to reduce 5 million tons of CO2 equivalent as gas emission, 500 million units of energy saved, 200 million kiloliter of water saved, 100,000 metric ton of waste reduced, 20 gigawatt peak of renewable energy. And do you know what? It's not Samaj Seva, it's not charity, it's not for environment. For an investment of 4,700 crores, 4,800 crores made by these 500 companies in this year, their annual saving is 4,700 crores. So you got to pay back on 11 months. Now it's a big financial decision. So there is a great case of business case for green. So what is happening to do? It happens in our homes if you put up solar, if you do communities do rainwater harvesting. There are multiple things we do. So the point that I want to bring to is urgent. Two, we guys better put our things together. When I say we guys, I mean an individual, a family, a company, a community, a city, a country, and maybe, sir, even group of countries. So that's where I want to leave the thing. There is urgency. Friends, it is something that we do. Sitting in this place where we are, right now, we insulate ourselves from a reality that is really poking us in the eyes, and we're just closing our eyes or looking the other way around. So with this background, I will now come to each one of you. Sir, we're taking a logic that the one who has come from maximum distance, दूर से जो आया है, we'll give him the first priority. So I will now request Dr. Arjun Kakri to take the things. He's a interesting background, converting diplomacy, government, NGO, education, everything. And I want to tell you, sir, even though you're a diplomat, don't have to be diplomatic in your opinion here. Be as frank as you can. Floor is yours, and please go ahead, sir.
Thank you, Pradeep ji. Distinguished panelists, Excellency, ladies and gentlemen, I really appreciate organizer for inviting me to speak to this very important event. This session, rightly named as Survival Before Sustainability, an agenda for this decade, reflects a pressing dilemma faced by nations and communities worldwide, especially in the global south. In the face of immediate crisis, climate disaster, economic instability, pandemics, and conflicts, the urgency of survival often overshadows the imperative of sustainability in our countries. We live in a world where survival is increasingly precarious. Nations are not merely grappling with policy dilemmas or economic downturns. They are facing a fundamental question of survival. IPCC report says that over the decades, climate change has intensified extreme weather events, floods, drought, wildfire, forcing millions to choose between immediate survival and long-term resilience. Ladies and gentlemen, in addition to this, we have also witnessed the Himalaya melting in South Asia, sea level rise in the Pacific, desertification in Africa. These challenges has been creating an existential threat to humanity globally. The COVID-19 pandemic further exposed the fragility of global systems, pushing economies into crisis mode and rolling back socio-economic gains in many parts of the world, particularly the global south. Even though we are forced to fight for survival, this is not at all an ideal scenario. Governments' dependency on fossil fuel illustrate this paradox. In moments of energy shortages, governments resort to increasing fossil fuel use to meet immediate demands. However, United Nations Environment Programme in 2023 reported that the short-term solution worsens climate change, which in turn leads to more extreme weather events, flood, food and livelihood insecurity, and economic instability. Ladies and gentlemen, the global north-south divide complicates the survival sustainability equation. Developing countries, which contribute the least to climate change, often bear the brunt of its impact. This includes UN-defined least developed countries, landlocked developing countries, and small island developing states, which are particularly vulnerable due to their limited resources, geographical constraint, and frequent exposure to climate hazard. At the COP29 in Baku, Azerbaijan, negotiators established a new collective quantified goal, which is popularly known as NCQG for climate finance, setting a target of 300 billion annually by 2035. This figure falls significantly short of the financial requirements identified by developing countries. Climate expert estimates suggest that developing countries require at least $5 trillion by 2030, not only to effectively implement the nationally determined contribution, which is known as NDCs, but to address the existing and future climate crisis. Excellency, ladies and gentlemen, we have been arguing that resources under the NCQG must be new and additional, predictable and adequate, affordable and grant-based, all the while enhancing the fiscal space of developing countries of the Global South. The United States' recent withdrawal from Paris Agreement undermines the principle of common but differentiated responsibility, which is known as CBDR, based on which rich countries must take the lead in fighting climate change since they cause most emissions. This exit shift from burden onto poorer countries, and even though they contribute far less to global emission. The US exit undermines the Paris Agreement's goal of limiting global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius. This could lead to other developed countries also weakening their commitment, worsening the climate crisis for the Global South. To move beyond mere survival towards a path of sustainability, it is imperative to build climate-resilient economy and assert climate justice on the global stage. Developing countries need to prioritize renewable energy and sustainable agriculture. Expanding solar, wind, and decentralized energy system will reduce reliance on fossil fuel while creating the job. Climate resilience can be strengthened not only through North-South, but also from South-South and triangular cooperation. Appropriate technology transfer, along with the meaningful efforts to aid climate diplomacy, can amplify the voices of developing countries and accelerate a just transition of our society. Addressing the causes and the impacts of climate change is essential for eradicating poverty and achieving sustainable development goals in our part of the world. Therefore, the 4th United Nations International Conference on Financing for Development, happening later this year, must actively explore and integrate diverse strategy to mobilize and direct climate finance in a ways that complement the work of the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, that is UNFCCC, and advance the Sustainable Development Goal. In closing, I appreciate India's active leadership in representing the G77 plus China group, advocating for priorities of developing countries by demanding fair and adequate climate finance from developed nations. India pushed for a robust new collective quantified goal, emphasizing sustainable grant-based funding to support a just transition to clean energy, as well as ensuring a balanced approach to both mitigation and adaptation is commendable. We encourage India to continue advancing these efforts, reinforcing the South-South cooperation agenda. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. I think you brought out the point more lucidly. Indifference, insensitiveness, and complete disregard to what the challenges are by the developed nation is not only in climate, we see it in many other forums. That's the thing to live with, but the answer is to cooperate among ourselves. May I now call, so we started with the longest distance, Nepal, so now we're getting Dhruva here. So because he's come all the way from Delhi, from CEW. Now he's worn many hats in his one life, business, NGO, government. You use a very special way of describing your things. So do tell us what your perspective is.
Sure.
All of 7 minutes.
Thank you all. Pleasure to be here. Good afternoon. Let me start off with, I was hearing since the morning the session, and I've now come to a point of fragmentation, Asia, economic resilience. That's what we've been hearing. Now we are in survival before sustainability. So is it survival before or survival and sustainability? So let me come out of the scope and states and discussions, and let me try and take you to a point where it all started. You know, if you look at Google through and if you say sustainability, you know what it says? It says Sustainability is meeting the needs of today without compromising the ability and the resources of the earth and society to meet the needs of future. That's a kind of textbook definition of sustainability. Now, where and how did we get into this? Let's say about 150 years ago, or maybe around 170 years ago, some gentleman called James Watt, Stevenson, Newcomb, they watched a kettle in a water boil, and that was the start of industrial revolution. What started was the steam engine. It came from coal. Now the whole thing happened in UK, and as adjoint areas spread through, you had what we call the industrial revolution come across, and man realized now from that day, and I was hearing today morning Mr. Ganesh Natarajan talk about Yuval Noah Harari, and his last book was Homo Deus. So where are we in survival? Do we think of this evolution of process to Homo Deus, Homo sapiens to Homo Deus? Homo Deus means God, Deus means God. So does Homo sapiens evolve out to survive? That's what Mr. Pradeep Bhargav is talking about. Does Homo sapiens survive, or do we evolve into something else? Evolution is a process. Darwin was there, and there's a natural selection. Do we then evolve from here? Have you ever realized that we are the only Homo sapiens? We have no cousins which exist on Earth? That's what Yuval Noah Harari writes. Now, this term has been called anthropogenic. The anthropogenicness, or you call it anthropogenic, is created by man. So we have created the process of saying that we need to improve our lives, we need to improve our efficiencies, we need to improve our comforts, and that's what we have gone through the process. And now we are trying to sort of reverse and rewind back. Now let me pause here to say that why are we into this? We are in a world, we are hearing, there is fragmentation, there is multipolar world, there is nationalism, there is democracy, there is, somebody had once said that if you want to be democratic and if you want to have globalization and nationalization, these cannot. And that was 20 years ago, Stiglitz had mentioned. It was repeated by Roderick in 2011, and that's what we are seeing today. And it's not about India or US, it's a globalized situation that you're seeing what we in today's parlance called somewhat like right of center or far right. So therefore, when we are talking of COP and COP not meeting, UNFCCC not meeting, how is a conference of parties going to meet? Because your problem lies in your existence as nation states, your existence as nationalism, that's required. So statehood is required, nation state is required, and it will not be meeting those goals, and therefore CBDR will not be held. So therefore, when we come to addressing a global public good, this is about a global public good. It's not about mitigating CO2 here or in Timbuktu. It has the same effect. And the only known means to man is forests so far for net zero. I know net zero is not a good term, but that's the only net. The question is, how is it impacting us? Temperature, acute weather events. We sit on this side of the world and we see 5 cyclones instead of 1 in the eastern coast of India. So when we look at the impact, let's understand that geography is also against developing countries. Where does the sun lie? You see, most of the developing countries is within the tropics. Between the Tropic of Cancer and capital and technology lies outside. So I need to get that. How do you get that happen? And therefore, it is easier said than done. It has to be politics at the end of the day. It has to be a political economy. Now, if I were to ask a politician in Europe, go back to a taxpayer and say that, yes, Maldives is sinking. Why don't you pay more tax for that? It's easier said than done. It's not that easy for it to be contributed two. But we take a long time and a step back, but fundamentally it is about existence of three entities: the government, the private sector, and you can call the rest of it non-government sector. Now think of where the problem lies is what Mark Carney, who was the ex-governor of the Bank of England, has said. It's a tragedy of horizons. So survival and sustainability is a tragedy of horizons. And why is it a tragedy of horizons? Because all of us here, we will discount our cash 10 years later, and discounted cash flow will be 15% discounting. So whether it is value or risk, you don't want to look into the future. And therefore, when corporate boards are talking about CSOs are being given a lip service, and I'm sure a lot of people who have worked at CSOs will understand that I'll have to tick the box, because at the end of the day, you need your bottom line, you need your multipliers, you need your market capitalization. These two do not converge. Let us clearly understand that these two do not converge. Therefore, private sector, and on the other side, why the cops fail, as Mr. Pradeep Bhargava was saying, because you have a bunch of government officers and bureaucrats taking decision on behalf of the entire private sector without mainstreaming them. So you're basically saying private sector will come in and contribute that 300 billion NCQG, one minute, NCQG, but the private sector is not mainstreamed. So there is a need for unison for the government and the private sector to work together, but private corporate existence has to necessarily quantify the future and value it more today. Otherwise, as Carney said, future is the past. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I think you brought it out very lucidly. Yeah, but people won't pay tax in US because Maldives is sinking, but if they do less drill, there'll be ozone layer may be safer. They don't have to pay tax. They can conduct their behavior. Anyway, that's a big debate. You're right. There's a conflict. Things. Raghu has been a sort of a long time champion of green. I learnt a lot from Raghu during my days, in CII. He's been steering the sustainability within CII and all his 9,000 members. Greatly, Raghu, share what your perspective on this issue is. Here, you're not CII, you're not industry. You would talk about the larger issue.
Thank you, Pradeep. First, I must thank you, Pradeep, as well as PIC for the wonderful opportunity given. And also, Pradeep, for doing actually a wonderful work on many green-related initiatives, which I'll also later on cover. Fundamentally, friends, what the core message I'm trying to say, I'm initially giving the summary, and later on I'll just go into further details. The core message is pursuing energy efficiency, green, all these environment-friendly technologies actually make business sense, period. And there are thousands of examples within India where actually companies have made huge profits and huge contribution to the society by pursuing green. Second thing is, we now have clear evidence. There are some companies who are pursuing net zero actually have started making more profits because they are pursuing net zero. So these are the initial important message I would like to say. Now let me go into the details. Pradeep, you might recall it all started, the story actually started, the Indian initiative on green, started in the year 2000 when Mr. Jamshed Godrej said, see, we are all going to preach green. Before we preach green, let's practice green. Then we'll have the confidence and we'll be able to show the business case. That's how the green movement was started in India. And the first green building was done in Hyderabad. Believe it or not, it achieved the prestigious platinum rating. And the year 2003, it was the greenest building in the world, and it maintained the world record for 2 years. So that was the biggest contribution India has made at that point of time. At that time, people thought, how can India do green because the environment is not that familiar or popular in India? So, but it was delivered. Having achieved this, this became the starting point or trigger point for many green buildings to come across the country. It's amazing to see. And what the building showcase is, yes, green is possible. Green is not a rocket science. You can do it. And what it requires is a willpower, and enough talent is available in India to deliver the green buildings. Today, as on today, we have more than 15,000 projects are going on green and about 13 billion square feet of green building footprint in India. And India stands number 2 in the world with respect to green buildings. So this is the achievement India has made. Why green buildings are popular? It's simple. Actually, it's, earlier I said it's not rocket science. Actually, it's very simple. If you're inside a green building, your productivity is up by 7%. What are the features that makes you the green features which makes you more productive? The place is well ventilated. The carbon dioxide level is always maintained about another 400 ppm above the ambience. Anything more than 1,000, people get drowsy. So when you have an ambience where you have daylight, you have ventilation, you are highly productive. And from your seat, if you are in a green building office, from your seat, you can see nature. And especially green hospitals, the concept is if you see nature, if you see water body from the hospital bed, the patient recovery is 30% faster after the operation. And in spite of the doctor, this fellow is likely to recover 30% faster. So this is the type of message I'm trying to say. These are actual proven examples with statistics coming in hospitals. You can see some of the hospitals who got buildings on both sides. They will give you a green shade on the other side. These are the techniques also being used by some people. Okay, but that may not actually treat the patient. Okay. Having said this, now the concept of green buildings are picking up. Now we have net zero building. Net zero building, there are more than almost 1,200 projects working on net zero building. Many of them achieved net zero certification. Even the platinum rated building which I mentioned, right now it is also a net zero building. A net zero building concept is very simple. Conventional building is you have about 275 to 300 units per square meter per year. That's a typical consumption. And a good green building, platinum rated building is somewhere about 100 to 125. From 200 to 300, we bring it to 100 by a green building concepts, etc. And the balance 100, that means you save about 70% in the energy conservation. The balance, the other 100, you do renewable energy, either in-house if you have the space, or you buy out the renewable energy. And there are more than 1,200 projects running out very economically. Another very interesting aspect of the renewable energy, believe it or not, and you have to really see it, and you have to negotiate on this. The cost of renewable energy, in-house generation, or through purchased energy, if the State Electricity Board allows you, it is much cheaper than the State Electricity Board power itself. The typical cost of a State Electricity Board varies from 5 rupees to 8 rupees per unit, whereas the renewable energy purchase energy is around 3 rupees to 5 rupees per unit. So you have tremendous financial advantage to pursue renewable energy also. Now this is I'm talking about buildings, now I'm talking about companies. See, buildings can be green, why not companies also green? Companies can be energy efficient, it can be super energy efficient, we call as world-class energy efficiency. They have the lowest energy consumption in the world with respect to that sector. For example, believe it or not, many of the cement companies in India are the lowest. We are talking about initially about 120 units per ton. Today we are talking about 55, 60 units per ton of cement. And this is the level. And if some international technology provider, many times their customers ask, okay, please show me where your technology has been implemented. They come all the way to India to showcase that technology. All the European technologies are more implemented in India. And Indian cement industry is an absolute leader in terms of green processes. Believe it or not, many of the cement companies are using waste as a fuel in cement industry. And Japan, this concept was actually originally in Japan. If you say cement industry in Japan, the main purpose of the cement industry is not to make the cement. It is to incinerate the waste. And in the process, incidentally, they make cement. And they make profit by burning the waste and also selling the cement. And same concept is also coming up in India. Okay, at least some of the cement companies have started doing extremely well. So in other words, what I'm trying to say, friends, green is making business sense. It is doing wonderfully very well. The potential is very large. And many times, the concept of net zero is coming up. There are 120 manufacturing companies in India which is operating on net zero. 120 operating companies. My colleague Muthu is the real champion and is facilitating this 120 companies. Enough data is available. Indian companies are really doing well. Believe it or not, this is another interesting point. There is one company called, the part of Brakes India Limited, part of the TVS group. They are making castings, forgings, etc. And many of the castings which are being supplied to Volvo, because they use renewable energy and they wheel the energy to the factory, and the entire casting is net zero. And because it's net zero, they have become the preferred supplier for many other big European companies, especially Volvo at Bangalore, using only that items. In other words, somebody is worried about, always when you go to meetings, etc., the CBAM has come, Indian companies are going to be charged. What Jamshed said is, please see this as an opportunity. Do not worry, you see it an opportunity to take lead. In fact, you can pursue net zero and you can become financially very attractive and also become a corporate leader in this activity. So this is the potential we have, friends. Thank you, Pradeep. Thank you for the wonderful opportunity. In India, this is already done. My humble request to each one of you, please just go with this question in mind. Are you working in a green company? Are you leading your company to green? Is your home a green home? India is a leader in green home. And green home, incremental cost of a green home is same as a normal home. There's nothing but different. So the question to you is, are you working in a green company? Are you looking for a green home? Second thing, are you buying green products? There are about nearly 12,000 to 50,000 green products already supplied and available in India. Believe it or not, the typical green building use 95% of the value of the product as a green certified products. This is the amount of progress India has made over a period of last 7 years. Thank you very much. Thank you, Pradeep. Thank you.
Thank you, Raghu. Internally in CII, we use the word, previously we say, please be green. Then we say, please be green. Now, do you know what we say? It's not nice to be green, you're stupid if you're not green. And that signature is very clear because the business case of green has become so things, and Raghu talked about it. It's just a business sense. So for an enterprise, it is valid. It is true for a hospital, it's true for a hospitality, it is true for every single thing, services sector. So I think the point I was coming to, from a national level, if every enterprise level starts owning up the responsibility. And one thing which Raghu didn't mention, which I just want to mention, we're pushing this agenda to the supply chain. I will buy your product as a customer in a company if you are green. So really speaking, you're pushing in your supply chain both up and down the green infection. And I think that's what is something as chain has started, which is going to make a big difference. So young man, Kaustubh, all yours. He's come all the way from Bombay, so that's why I'm giving you. And I'm come all the way from Pune, I'm going to come next. A rounded educational, professional upbringing, and now he has gravitated towards sustainable transportation solution.
Thank you, Pradeep ji, and thank you, PIC, for this opportunity. If you allow me, one question to the entire audience. Initially, I used to ask how many of you all came here by public transport, but the question I'm going to ask is how many of you all took your private vehicles to come here today? Just raise your hands. That's a good chunk of the entire audience that we have here. The more and more I go to conferences, and the more and more I keep hearing about COPs and how badly COP29 performed, I've realized that only crisis can beat conferences. And it is going to take a very bad crisis for us to really start looking at climate change as a real problem. The only time I can remember in the past decade when I saw Mumbai with blue skies was during COVID. And that was sad to see that it took a COVID-19 for us to see blue skies in Mumbai. A couple of themes that I've been picking up since yesterday. There's been a conversation about, the rich countries having to pay for us to mitigate the emissions. But I feel like India has been taking initiatives themselves. And, I've been working in the sustainable mobility field for almost 5 years now. And specifically to EVs, I want to give you some matrix. We've sold 5.5 million EVs in India by the year 2024. That has saved us 14.5 million tons of GHG emissions. And the government has put in $15.3 billion for supporting the EV transition. This is a clear indication that we do not have to wait for the developed nations to come support us for, greening our entire mobility systems, greening our buildings, greening companies, or, even reducing our scope 3 emissions. Through my conversation today, I want to focus on, our transition to clean fuel, our transition to using more public transport, our modal shift, fuel efficiency and traffic management as well. We've been seeing a lot of construction. There's metro, there's more and more bridges coming in all the cities. But is there a light at the end of the tunnel? I do not know that. I feel like we've been constructing over the past decade, and I don't know after 10 years down the line if my children are going to be able to see a Mumbai or a Pune, which is traffic-free, which is clean in terms of air. And that is a concern that we all need to start thinking about. When it comes to fuel efficiency, we've gone from BS1 stage to BS6 now. We jumped BS5 completely. They keep saying efficiencies improve 50%, 60%. But are they giving you specific values? It's 0.6%, 0.6 mg to 0.5 mg, and that's what they quantify as 50 or 60% reduction. And that's not really giving you the amount of reduction in air quality that you really want to start looking at. So these are all the things that are concerning. These are all the things that people here need to start thinking about. Our bureaucrats need to start thinking about, our politicians need to start thinking about. Obviously, the CSO community, the universities, the accommodations, everybody has been talking about it, but like, you've mentioned, we've been given the quiet lip. We've been told that, after a certain point, there has to be consequences to what we say. So it's very tricky for us to keep pushing certain things towards climate change. But then again, I want to show the positive side to the entire story as well, right? Just looking at public transport, currently India has around 1.5 lakh buses, and we still have a deficit of around 1 lakh buses to be on the road to make that system efficient. But there's a lot of money and a lot of effort put by the government with the PME drive, with the PM e-bus seva, with the target of having at least 50,000 buses by 2027 in India, which is kudos to the government, but there is more required, right? And there is more thought that is required in urban planning when it comes to sustainable mobility, with the new area being developed around the Navi Mumbai International Airport, the new cities that are going to be coming up. I see the amount of FSI that is being given to buildings versus the width of the road that is going to be there. We are setting ourselves up for failure when it comes to traffic management. I feel like most of the cities are struggling with parking policies. It is a political decision. I know it affects a lot of people when parking becomes stringent, parking becomes expensive in the business parts of cities. But I feel like it's time for us to start taking those difficult decisions, because that's only when we'll start seeing those transitions happen. And, we've been speaking about doing it ourselves. We've been speaking about, being research partners. One thing I would really want to say has happened in India, which is being adopted by the West now. Our aggregator policy, where we brought the cost of e-buses down by a significant value, is something that the West is looking at as a model, and they're trying to implement something similar. Same goes for the electric freight industry. There is a platform created by NITI Aayog called eFast, Electric Freight Accelerator for Sustainable Transportation. That is something that Brazil is taking up. So India is at the forefront of these mobility solutions in terms of sustainability. But I feel like we still have a lot to go in terms of understanding what our problems are and trying to have systemic changes in terms of understanding how we can solve problems in terms of traffic, in terms of how we start having people move differently. And a few numbers that I want to tell you right now. as of today, the CO2 contribution of road transport is around 12 to 14%. That's a lot of impact on your health, the impact on your future generations. And that in urban cities is around 20 to 30%. So the 12% to 14% is an India-wide number, and in urban cities it's 20 to 30%. So these are the numbers that I want you all to walk out with and think about when you all are wanting to drive your car around. But I want you all to start thinking about sustainable transportation, be it personal EVs, but I would prefer that the people start moving in public transport. It's very widely said across the globe. Countries can be truly rich when the richest start moving in public transport. Yeah, that'll be 2 cents from my end. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you so much, Kaustav. I think you brought out another perspective. Raghu brought out the buildings, the enterprises, you brought about the transportation. Now, these are not fireflies, these are lighthouses. These are not sporadic incidents, these are concentrated, considered, distilled options and proven solutions. So the message that I want to come out is, really speaking and not being sarcastic, we in our own immediate environment can start changing the world around us. Let's not worry beyond a point on somebody's drilling, let them drill. Let's drill home the point that we need to do something in our own environment. We talked about industry, we talked about public transport. There is a lot more we need to be looking at. Individuals, societies, families need to be equally sensitive because they can make a difference, and there's a business case for them as well. I mean, we see this happening. So now we have exactly 20 minutes. So instead of all 4 of you asking questions, I'm just going to ask one of you to ask someone else. In 2-3 minutes, quick one, and any other person will ask the other person. So all 4 will get engaged with 2 people asking questions and 2 people answering questions. And then we'll keep it to the house, the last 10 minutes. So choose, you decide, I'm not. Choose who you asking the question.
Okay. Yeah, I'll start. Pradeep, I'm going to ask to our friend Gustav on the city planning. I think you raised a very important city issue, planning of the cities. In fact, if you really see, very interesting point is, you see the design of Delhi and Gurgaon on side, and you see the Bombay, Thane, and Kalyan. If you see at a city at a macro level, I would say this is a classic example of a very bad design. Okay. What is meant by bad design? If you see this concept is, best is easily visible in Bombay. There will be a train load of people coming from one direction, from north to south. In the morning, it's like comes like a wave. And then in the evening, it goes back like a wave. Okay. And it's a colossal national waste of time. It's 2 hours in the train, 2 hours coming, and 2 hours going and waiting, etc. It's a national waste of time. So now, in other words, city design is an issue, and urban transportation is an issue. So what are the thoughts? How do we design the city in such a fashion? The transportation is minimized, the people are there near the office jobs, etc. There is a need to have the design change in the cities. What is your thought?
You don't give the full city plan because we
No,
just have
obviously.
2 minutes. Yeah, just 2 minutes for you. Yeah.
You know, one of the concepts that's been spoken about a lot, and it'll be echoed by a lot of my colleagues here, is these 15-minute cities where, you know, it just takes 15 minutes for you to get to your office. It takes 15 minutes to get to your grocery store. It takes 15 minutes to, you know, drop your kids to the school. This is a very idealistic scenario. I mean, we've built cities now, and we can't go back to having these, we can't think about having these 15-minute cities in the existing cities at least. But with our newer constructions and our newer cities that are coming in, we need to start thinking about, you know, having these business districts developed, you know, these pockets of business districts, these pockets where, you know, there's residential, there's mixed use, where people don't have to travel longer distances to get to their work. You know, Mumbai has a geographical disadvantage. The way the island cities is, you know, the shape of the city is, it's not going to be, we are not going to be able to solve the problem like a Gurgaon or a Delhi has, because they have a ring road system. Even Bangalore has a ring road system, and that makes it a little easier for the commute to happen. But that is not the case which is going to be in Mumbai. But at least with the MMR, which is growing further, the concern that I raised right now, we are still setting up ourselves for failure because we are not thinking in the direction of the future. We are still taking practices that were probably from the 1960s to design our cities even today.
Yeah, thank you. So I think integrated townships is a classic case where you have schools, hospitals, residential, commercial places, and whole lot of decentralized thing. Yeah, at least if we can't retrofit existing cities, let the new communities coming up be done is one way of addressing a lot of, it's not a green only, it's quality of life, it's a quality of ease of living also. Dhruva, you have answer, you have to.
Yeah, Dr. Arjun Kirk, you have an interesting career in the sense of being a diplomat, an ambassador, and then being with NGOs, UN institutions, and you are like now Himalayan Ayurveda University. So what my question is, see, if you look at Nepal or even the northern part or northeastern part of India is one of the most fragile ecosystems, which is anywhere, and that fragile ecosystem is surely getting disturbed. And if I were to take back, and I never knew another word in this Sikkim which was called Gloft, glacial lake outburst. So, I mean, my question to you is there anything, are we missing out anything in policy? Are we missing out anything as a government or even in the industry? Or is it indigenous practices which needs to be brought in? Just your thoughts, please.
Okay, thank you very much. I really appreciate your concern and question about what's happening in, let me put in a language called Himalaya, right? So in my earlier remarks, I have mentioned that the Himalaya melting is an issue. But you see, I was talking to one of the member of the Pune International Center the other day on climate issue. Climate issue is always interpreted as greenhouse gas emission, climate crisis, in a very scientific language. But to me, coming from a different background, as you have mentioned earlier, it has a direct bearing in life and livelihood of the people. Due to Himalaya melting and glacial lake outburst, the whole farming system of entire Himalaya region is changing. Where we used to grow apple, now we cannot grow. We have to change our entire farming system to adapt to the climate change. So this is, and so when we discuss about the climate crisis with the people in academia or a think tank like yours, we often forget to talk about how this is going to affect the poorest of the poor, marginalized, indigenous people. This is one. That's why we are not only in Nepal, but also the entire Himalayan region are going through a very difficult time. The other question about indigenous knowledge and practices. In fact, I was also trying to talk about that. There are several people's indigenous practices to cope the challenges faced by extreme weather or climatic condition. So we should also really devise strategies so that our traditional knowledge and practices used in our part of the world need to be in resource, documented and practiced. Thank you.
I'm looking at the clock very carefully. We've just 13 more minutes. I just want to, just 1 minute I'll take. Normally when I attend such seminars, I resolve myself that I will say nothing about what somebody else has to do. Typical discussion, what will I do, is very easy. And particularly government becomes a very convenient beating box. Government should do this, government should do that. I'm refraining here, except one submission I want to make here to this. When Raghu described, when you talked about, all of you talked about the direct economics and the climatic advantage of being within quotes green, I'm using green as a terminology. And private sector is doing it. Why should not just Bharat Sarkar, every Sarkar, municipal bodies should not insist that every single enterprise that they finance, they build, green infrastructure, green office complexes, green commercial complexes, green railways, green everything. It's not rocket science. And if the government, which makes big investment, we have to 8 lakh crores and 10 lakh crores funding, insists that everything is green. So the point I'm making it, let's not worry about what's happening in Baku and what's happening in Paris. We as a country, and this applies to every country, not just our country, every country, Nepal can do it. Let's resolve ourselves that what's it within our control, we will behave ourselves in a green manner so as to be able to come to at least our immediate environment is clean. I think the minister started with Swachh Bharat, if you remember yesterday. Swachh Bharat itself, besides hygiene, besides looking good, has an advantage of waste reduction. Isn't that a big green thing to do? So I think as a nation, we can achieve a lot in trying to evolve, that we don't have to struggle. Survival, sustainability, big words, but I think there is a lot we can do. So I have 11 more minutes, so I would request the audience, is that all right, Vandana? 10 minutes of questions? Yeah, okay. So please identify who you are and who you want the question to be. There's a gentleman there.
Thank you. This was a very excellent, comprehensive discussion on climate change, but I specifically want to highlight and this question would be more on a solution seeking. So I want to understand that climate change impact specifically on the water resources, because I read and write and more research on water resources, and specifically in context of India and China, because this is a very hot topic and this is very concerning to the downstream countries also. What China is doing on the upper riparian region, and they're constructing proposed a dam on the Medong County. So if any of you can take up this question, and because both the countries do not have any formal water treaty. And secondly, for all the Delhiites who are actually, getting choked up due to the air pollution. So any of you are thinking on that line also, of thinking of any viable solution, because this is a cause of concern and we are seeking any kind of a very immediate viable solution to it. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll just venture to say what China does is not only with building dams, and I think Gautam is the right person to answer how to handle China blocking water or blocking anything. That's a political issue. It doesn't change the amount of water, etc. It does. Delhi problem is a problem which we have created, and I think that has a solution. Multiple, we typically say fire ho raha hai because Haryana and Punjab doing all the politics apart. There is a genuine problem. AQI levels are very high. Would anyone of you, if you have an answer, give it to the Chief Minister of Delhi, new Chief Minister also. Yeah.
Okay, I think you're better placed. You're in Mumbai and come from Delhi, stay in Gurgaon. Okay. AQI Delhi, it often crosses 1,000. Okay, so we all understand that. The question is, when you look at solution, I have to talk history, I'm sorry, because, when I was in school, it was about Punjab, the land of 5 rivers which grows wheat. Why did we change it to the highest rice growing state in India? How did it happen? And because it is the highest rice growing state, the gap between the crops, there is no other solution to crop burning unless we do it. But crop burning is not the only issue. You have enacted a legislation, actually it's a central legislation, it's called the CAQM, and it's empowered. But the CAQM head, can he pass any judgments and order for compliance? Is it quasi-judicial or will it be contested again? So we have layers of problem, and let me just give you the broad numbers. Maybe actually it is construction, and sometimes it is mistaken for climate change because air quality is SPM 2.510, SOx and NOx, carbon dioxide does not create air pollution. So the problem lies in enforcement and not enforcing reduction of pollution at source. And last point what I want to make is, India enacted Air Pollution Act in 1982, 81, 82 at that period. And there's a huge private industry of air pollution control. Is just because enforcement did not happen, the entire air pollution industry closed down in India. Today, you will not find, except electrostatic precipitators, you will not find Venturi scrubbers being made, you will not find back filters. And I think you will agree with me here.
Is it okay now? Yeah. No, the problems of multilateral agencies not being able to arrive at a consensus due to their individual interest applies in a very definite manner in our own country too, where there are multiple states, multiple stakeholders, multiple lobbies, multiple interested groups who come in the way of a solution. So answer to, we're not giving an answer, we're just saying this is the dynamics we see in every public life issue, where whether it's transportation, whether it's pollution, whether it's water. So next question, please.
Hello everyone, thank you for the insightful session. My name is Mugdha Satpute. So I would like to know your views on the intersection of right to development and climate justice based on the work done worldwide on sustainability and achieving sustainable development goals. So as a developing nation, let it be India or Nepal, what are your views on these both fields as they go hand in hand as well as they can go against each other? Thank you.
Which development and climate?
Right to development and climate justice.
Right to development.
And climate justice.
Is there such a thing called right to development?
I mean, I guess we are a developing nation, so we have the right to development.
Yeah, we have a right.
But
right to develop within the regulatory framework, within the laws of the land. I mean, that's true for everything. Every right, of course, latest here is right to what you put on the YouTube, but that apart. On a serious note, every citizen, every enterprise in this country has to conform to the laws of the land. Who has put those laws? People who we have elected. The people who we elected, who we trust, have come out with laws and rules which define the boundary conditions in which you operate. The development right is that it cannot say on Senapati Bapat Road, I'm going to put a shop middle of the road. It's by right to develop a business. No, you can't. There are norms. So really speaking, right to development is a right which is within boundary conditions. And environment laws also have their own conditions. So I'm not clear as to where is the conflict, because one has to work in the other thing unless you have something.
and
I think you possibly are referring to, I mean, there is a conflict there between what we call SDGs 1, 2, and 3, and the minister was referring to. Is it roti, kapda, makan, sarak, bijli, pani versus sustainability and climate? Yes, there is. So what is called, it's an impossible trinity, not the central bank one, but jobs, sustainability, and growth may not really be a possible trinity. Similarly, when you look at environment and you come to saying climate, water, air, they again do not always go together. And finally, health, education, and environment is the three sides of the triangle. You will need to balance all sides.
Yeah, I just want to, in corporate world, we used to say, either you can have quality or quantity, both don't exist, or you can be ethical or be successful, don't exist. We also want to believe, we were all made to believe that Vikas means Vinash, that development leads to erosion of the environment. But there is a happy medium comes. You can have Vikas without doing Vinash. You can still have growth without coming in the way of destructing environment. So measured, responsible development is not, but he's right. At some point of time, I want to give everybody a house in this area, and that I don't care about FSI and I just want to do it is going against the very norms that we don't have roads and so on. There's conflict, but then life is about samjhauta, life is about santulan, life is about understanding, coming to an equilibrium. We are a democracy, so we air it all the time, but the answer is not very easy. Any other question? I have just 2 minutes.
I will just related to that question, because one of the things about when we talk about right to development, I'm an international trade economist. So one often hears is about this right to development debate that you have with developed world, what you call this green protectionism, where they impose very intense green standards and regulations and requirements on imports from developing countries. And developing countries, most businesses don't have the technology, the capacity, or even standards certifying institutions in their countries to be compliant. And as a result, these access to larger markets like European Union is denied to them because of these stringent regulations. So often you hear this development and climate change conflict in that context. I would love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I just had, but I'm saying right to life. I must get good Medicare, pharma support, healthcare. I want it. It's my right, perhaps, but it's not possible. So you just compromise on it. It's not sometimes only because of regulation. Sometimes not feasible, economic reasons, etc. The belief that you got to earn your entitlements, not you as an individual, we as a society, we as a country, we as a community. Some of these cities have been able to go ahead and do a lot of things in our own country. Do sensible development, do sensible equilibrium by proper planning and the cooperation of cities. Why is Indore a clean city? Why is Pune not such a clean city? It's got to do with just not the regulation, not the sarkar. It's us also. If we create the right ambience, the right equation, and the right conduct ourselves, it can help. Unless you want to.
Yes. Yeah. See, just a very interesting point. I think that somehow both the questions are getting linked now. The fundamental point is, if right to develop, somebody is asking, it doesn't mean he has the right to emit. Okay, it doesn't mean he's got a right to pollute. That means there's a belief that if you develop, you will also emit more. I think there is a dichotomy or there's some issue here. The fundamental point we are trying to say is that, in fact, that's what I was talking about. It is possible to have high-quality systems, development-oriented activities with the least energy consumption. There are technology, knowledge, systems, talent, capabilities available in India, and we can do it. What others should insist, we should not bother about them. We should do what is right. And in fact, I was trying to showcase many of the cases where actually companies have achieved more profits by doing what is right thing. So friends, there is a huge scope there.
Thank you so much. Please give our panel and Pradeep a big round of applause. Great. Could I ask Dinanath Kolkar, trustee of PIC, to come up and present a little memento for everyone? So Dina, if I could ask you to start with Costa. Round of applause, please. Mr. Raghupati. Dr. Arjun Karki. Dr. Dhruba Purkaista. And I think and of course, to our moderator, Pradeep. And let's get a group picture there then.